My guest today is Dr. Richard Jackson. He is the Deputy Director at the National Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies at Otago University. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
The topic of war and conflict, I mean, this is something as old as the ages, literally, but I mean, even with the changes to society, the changes of technology, the causes of war are almost as ancient as time itself as well. What do you see to be the key causal factors in war and conflict?
People go to war for a variety of different reasons. And to be honest, I think a lot of people try not to think about the risks. I mean, people go to war for patriotism, they go to war for adventure and excitement. But societies accept war partly because they've been conditioned into thinking that war is a good way of dealing with threats or dealing with conflicts. And they've been conditioned into thinking that war is sometimes the only option. And I think, this is one of the points at which my research and the research of our centre is trying to question it, because we know, for example, that war most often produces future war and further violent conflict. And that there are all kinds of non-violent alternatives to war which are actually empirically much more effective. They have a much better record of resolving conflict, and they have a much better record of creating a peaceful society in the long term.
Do you think that the New Testament theology is inconsistent with the view of war?
I personally believe it is, and I think if we look at the life of Jesus himself, and if we look at the early church, they were all pacifists. They definitely did not volunteer to go to war, and Jesus saying, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, and then telling Peter to put down his sword, and not choosing to call down his armies when he faced certain death at the hands of his oppressors. Mm-hmm. To me, I find that irreconcilable with the idea that we can organize society and get people to practice and train how to kill other people in a very large set of numbers.
Do you think pacifism then is the only appropriate moral response to war from a Christian viewpoint?
It is my choice. To me, I can't read the New Testament and read about the life of Jesus Christ and see that he would ever fire a flamethrower at someone and burn them to a crisp. I mean, to me, it's incompatible to think that you can love your enemies and try to blow them up with phosphorus bombs, that you can engage in large-scale murder, and that you could plan for that murder and train for that murder, and then find ways of justifying that. To me, Jesus represents a whole new way of solving our problems. In terms of defending freedom, in terms of defending our values, I mean, I think again that the example of Jesus is pertinent here, because he was being oppressed and being executed on false pretenses, and he was facing a Roman Empire that several hundred people a week would be put up on crosses and murdered in the most horrible way. I mean, if you want to think about any oppressive regime, the Romans were one of the most oppressive in history. Now, he did not say to his followers, you are now justified because they're an oppressive regime to take up arms against them.
Something that he did say, though, he said, I mean, blessed be the peacemakers. But
absolutely.
But I suppose the concept of peace, is that just an absence of war, or is it something more complex than that?
Oh, it's much more complex than that. Being a peacemaker involves finding ways of dealing with conflicts and finding ways of dealing with oppressions and the conflicts that they produce in a non-violent way. And I think, again, the example of Christ is perfect here, because he talks about loving your enemies rather than hating them and trying to kill them and trying to injure them. And he's all about trying to win over your enemies rather than defeat them. And I think his sacrificial life as well suggests that sometimes, for the sake of peace, for the sake of God's kingdom, we sacrifice our freedoms and we don't cross that line where we become oppressors by killing people in response. And to me, that's what I take from the New Testament.
Do you think that war is a part of our society, that it is just, if you like, an ugly but inevitable part of the way in which human beings respond to each other? Or do you see that it would be possible for there to be a world in the future where war is something which is only in the history books?
Well, I think there are a lot of things in our society that are probably quite permanent. Oppression, abuse, war, violence, all these things are there. However, that's no reason to give up and say we're just going to accept it. And I think the people who fought against slavery, I mean, slavery was once just a part of our society. It had been in society for thousands of years. It was institutionalized. It was a core part of our economic system. People said if you get rid of slavery, the economy will collapse. We can't really think of anything different. If we think about the oppression of women and the way in which they've been treated throughout history, that was thousands of years. But I think we've made progress on all these things. And we've done that because we've believed that we can work for a better world. And I think, you know, to me, the Lord's Prayer, where we pray, you know, we want to bring God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, is about saying we have a permanent commitment to trying to work towards justice, peace, truth, and all the sort of kingdom values that Christ himself exhibited. And so I'm not pessimistic, and I'm not going to say that I think that one day, in 100 years or 200 years, whatever, there'll be a perfect society, but I think that maybe in 100 years, if we work hard now, society will be better, and we may have gotten rid of a lot of the violence that currently exists.
Dr. Richard Jackson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.